My husband shoved me from our balcony on Christmas night, but I lived to reveal his truth. Snow floated down in lazy spirals over Manhattan, catching the light from the Vance penthouse and turning the night into a glittering postcard. 5 stories above the street, Malcolm Vance's glass palace glowed gold and warm, jazz drifting through the air while waiters slipped between velvet gowns and sharp tuxedos carrying trays of champagne and tiny, perfect appetizers. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. Everything in that place was designed to impress. The towering Christmas tree dripping with crystals, the enormous wreaths, the champagne fountain sparkling under chandelier light. It was a party built to say one thing: Malcolm Vance wins at everything. Near the balcony doors, away from the loudest laughter, stood Imani Harper. Her hand rested protectively over her 6-month belly, fingers absently tracing the curve as she tried to steady her breathing. Her back ached, her feet pulsed with pain inside her heels, and the scent of cologne and artificial cinnamon made her feel like she was suffocating. She needed real air. Imani eased open the balcony door and stepped into the cold. The city stretched beneath her like a field of lights, streets veined with moving cars, rooftops dusted with snow. The balcony wrapped around the building, edged with glass railings that left nothing between her and the drop but transparent walls. Cold air bit at her cheeks. Snow landed on her eyelashes and melted into tiny drops that cooled the heat behind her eyes. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and finally, felt her thoughts quiet down. For a brief moment, it was just her, the baby, and the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. The music behind her dulled when the balcony door opened again. She didn't have to turn to know who it was. Malcolm's footsteps always had the same weight, the same entitled rhythm. He walked like every surface was built for him. "Imani," he said, his voice already edged with annoyance. "What are you doing out here? People are asking for you." She turned, keeping her expression calm. "I just needed a moment. It's loud inside." He stepped out, letting the door close behind him. Snow dusted his dark hair. His cheeks flushed with alcohol, and the veins in his neck stood out in angry lines. Even under his tailored suit, the tension in his body was obvious. "You're embarrassing me," Malcolm muttered, lowering his voice but not his temper. "It's Christmas. My investors are here. The press is here. They expect to see a united family, not my wife hiding on the balcony." "I'm not hiding," she answered softly. "I just needed some air. My feet hurt. I'm exhausted." He let out a short, dangerous laugh that held no amusement. "Air. You say that every time you slip away. Do you know what they think when they see you vanish? That something's wrong. That I can't control my own home." "What they think doesn't matter to me," she whispered. "It matters to me." He moved closer, the smell of whiskey wrapping around her like another suffocating cloud. His words sharpened with each breath. The more he spoke, the more she found herself backing away, step by step, until her lower back brushed against the cool glass railing. "Malcolm, you're scaring me," she said, voice trembling. "You're always scared," he snapped. "Always dramatic. I just needed you at my side tonight. Smile. Hold my arm. Look like you belong here. But instead you disappear, you look miserable, and everyone notices." His eyes flicked down to her stomach. "Just look at you." She swallowed. "Please. Let's go inside. We can talk later." "Calm down," he repeated softly when she said the words. "You think I'm not calm?" Snow settled on his expensive coat as he stared at her, anger sharpening into something colder, more deliberate. Before she could step sideways, his hand shot out and clamped around her forearm. His fingers dug into her skin. She gasped and tried to pull away. "Malcolm, you're hurting me." He didn't let go. The shove came so fast it hardly felt real. A violent, careless motion that shifted her balance just enough. Her heel slipped on a thin patch of snow. Her weight tilted backward. Her arms flew out, searching for anything to grab. For one stretched out second, time slowed. She saw the party lights behind him. The reflection of the city in the glass. Malcolm's face frozen. Part rage, part instant regret. Then there was only air. Imani's scream tore out of her as the balcony fell away beneath her feet. The freezing wind slammed against her body as she dropped, snowflakes swirling around her like shards of glass. The glittering windows rushed past. Somewhere above, Malcolm clutched the railing and looked down at what he had just done. Inside, the music shattered into silence. The trumpet cut off mid-note. People turned, confused, as a scream from the balcony door ripped through the penthouse. Oh my God, she fell. Crystal glasses hit the floor and exploded into glittering fragments. Conversation died. Fear swept through the room like a shockwave. Guests surged toward the balcony, heels sliding on marble, hands over mouths. Tanisha Boyd, standing nearest to the doors, clutched her sequined clutch to her chest. Her lips formed a perfect O of horror, but in her eyes, for the briefest flicker, something else passed through, something like dark satisfaction, before she smoothed it away behind a mask of concern. Someone call 911, a man shouted, pushing through the crowd. Guests crowded to the railing outside. Their breath steamed in the icy air as they peered down at the street. I heard something hit a car, one whispered. I think she landed on a hood, another murmured. Phones came up like a field of small glowing rectangles, zooming, trembling, searching. Some typed frantically, fingers slipping as they texted emergency services. Inside, by the Christmas tree, a cluster of guests held onto each other and stared at the balcony, stunned. Others whispered prayers. A champagne tower glimmered untouched in the corner as the party dissolved into chaos. Then Malcolm re-entered from the balcony. Snow clung to his shoulders. His jaw was tight, his expression twitching between shock and calculation. He raked a hand through his hair and inhaled deeply, forcing his features into something that looked like grief from far enough away. What happened? A man demanded. She slipped, Malcolm answered too quickly. The snow on the balcony. She's been unstable lately. Stressed. You all saw it. Some guests traded uncertain looks. Others just stared blankly, clinging to the first explanation offered to them. A few nodded because it was easier than arguing with a powerful man in his own home. Tanisha stepped up to Malcolm, laying a gentle hand on his arm, her voice soft and dramatic. This is terrible, she said. We all saw how emotional she was tonight. Maybe it was too much for her. Her words slid into the room like oil on water, smoothing some of the panic, bending it toward the story Malcolm needed. Imani overwhelmed, Imani unstable, Imani the problem. Meanwhile, out on the balcony, someone whispered, "Wait, look. I think she's moving." A low murmur spread. She might be alive. For the first time that night, hope and fresh terror rushed through the crowd. The news rippled through the penthouse like a live wire. She moved. She's alive. Someone said she landed on a car. Guests rushed back inside to tell the others, speaking over each other, voices rising and colliding in the warm, decorated room that suddenly felt like a cage. Instead of calming anyone, the possibility that Imani had survived made the air heavier. If she lived, there would be questions, statements, camera footage, police, lawyers, stories that couldn't be quietly controlled. Malcolm heard the words and went pale for a heartbeat before forcing control back into his posture. His fingers tightened on the back of a chair until the knuckles blanched. His mind raced ahead of everyone else in the room. If she talks, I'm finished. He searched the crowd and found his security chief standing near the hallway. Check the cameras, Malcolm ordered under his breath when he reached him. Delete everything from the balcony and the corridor. Now. The guard hesitated. Sir, the police. Before they get here, Malcolm snapped. Do it. The man swallowed hard, then hurried toward the security room as ordered. Around the room, whispers had shifted. No longer just about the fall, but about the host himself. Did you hear? He wants the balcony footage gone. Is that even legal? Who's going to be the one to tell him no? Fear crept through the room like fog. People who had once competed for Malcolm's attention now avoided his eyes. Some were too dependent on him financially to speak up. Others were simply too frightened. Tanisha watched everything. For years, she'd been drawn to the spotlight, to attention, to the center of any room. Tonight was no different. Even through the chaos, she still recognized an opening, an empty space beside a powerful man that she believed would soon be hers. She straightened her glittering dress, smoothed her hair, and walked toward the center of the room as if someone had just called her name. "Is everyone holding up?" she asked, her voice soft and trembling. "Not too much, just enough. This is a horrible night. Malcolm is devastated." A small circle formed around her. Guests listened. Some clung to any thread of story that might help them understand what had just happened. "Imani hasn't been well," Tanisha continued gently. "He tried so hard with her. He did everything he could. She pushed herself too far tonight." The men nearby traded uncertain looks, but her tone, her posture, the calculated break in her voice all worked together. She was crafting a narrative just as carefully as the caterers had arranged the hors d'oeuvres. "He feels guilty," she added, touching her chest. "Even though he shouldn't. He always put her first." Later, by the bar, she allowed her phone to flash a carefully chosen photo on the screen. Her and Malcolm standing close, his hand resting comfortably low on her waist, both of them smiling like there was no one else in the room. She didn't shove the image in anyone's face. She simply let it sit there, angled just enough for the woman next to her to accidentally see. "Are you and Malcolm?" the woman whispered, eyes wide. "It's complicated," Tanisha answered with a delicate sigh. "There were plans. We were waiting for the right time. He didn't want to pressure Imani while she was pregnant. She wasn't in a good place." The woman stared at her, stunned. "So you love him?" "Yes," Tanisha said simply, letting the word hang in the air. The confession spread rapidly. People began to drift together and apart in little knots, repeating pieces of what they'd heard. He and Tanisha were serious. He was going to leave his wife. She said he didn't want to upset a pregnant woman who was already struggling. The picture being painted was clear. Malcolm and Tanisha responsible, steady, quietly in love. Imani unstable, fragile, the center of a disaster she'd created herself. But the story wasn't landing as smoothly as Tanisha imagined. Near the balcony door, a young woman who had seen the fall wiped at her eyes with shaking hands. Her friend tried to soothe her, glancing nervously toward Malcolm. "I saw her face before she went over," the young woman whispered. "She looked terrified. She tried to grab something. That wasn't a slip." "Keep your voice down," her friend urged. "He's listening." "I don't care if he is," she replied, staring across the room at Malcolm. "Something's wrong." Malcolm heard the words even from across the space. They might as well have been shouted. He walked toward the women, his face composed, his voice gentle and patronizing. "Are you two okay?" he asked. "Tonight has been hard on everyone." "I saw her reach out," the young woman said, forcing her voice not to break. "It didn't look like an accident." "Of course she reached out," Malcolm answered smoothly. "Anyone would grab for the railing if they slipped. There was snow out there. I asked her to come inside. She wouldn't listen." "That's not how it looked," the young woman insisted. "You're in shock," Malcolm said, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. The kindness in his touch was hard and controlled. "When the police come, please don't say something you aren't sure about. We don't want confusion making this worse." Her friend gently pulled her back, and Malcolm turned away, giving a quick signal to security as he did. "Make sure no one gives a statement before I speak to the police," he murmured to his head of security when they passed. "We keep this clean." Near the fireplace, a couple watched him, eyes narrowed. "He's trying to control everyone," the woman said. "He could ruin our business with one phone call," her husband muttered. "Don't get involved." Tanisha drifted back toward Malcolm, her confidence thinning at the edges as she sensed the room starting to tilt away from him, and by extension, from her. "People are starting to doubt you," she whispered. "Maybe we should." "I said I'll handle it," he cut in sharply. She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. For the first time that night, a real cold thread of fear ran through her. Not for Imani. Not for the baby. For herself. For everything she had publicly attached to Malcolm's name. The sirens outside grew louder, echoing up the glass walls. Red and blue light flickered over the decorations and the faces of the guests. The penthouse no longer felt like a glamorous holiday celebration. It felt like a stage, one where the curtain was about to rise on the truth. And the truth was not on Malcolm's side. The wail of the sirens grew sharper, closer, until finally it cut through the muffled panic inside the penthouse. Everyone seemed to breathe in at the same time and then hold it, as if exhaling might bring the police rushing through the doors faster. Malcolm stepped into the center of the room and clapped once, loudly. The sound rang against the marble, commanding attention. "Listen," he said, voice low but carrying. "We need to stay calm and stay inside. The police will arrive soon, and we all need to be clear about what happened. It was an accident. There was snow. She slipped. That's the truth." A man near the bar frowned. "Why are we agreeing on a story? If it was an accident, it should speak for itself." "If anyone spreads lies or exaggerations," Malcolm answered, smiling, "I will treat it as slander. I don't care how long we've known each other. I won't let anyone destroy my family's reputation with rumors." A nervous whisper floated from somewhere in the room. "He's threatening us." "Think about your own lives," Malcolm continued. "Your company. Your names. There are cameras downstairs. Press will be all over this. If you want your faces on the news, caught in some invented drama, go ahead. Otherwise, you stay quiet until the facts are confirmed." "Facts," he repeated, as if he could shape reality just by choosing the word. Before anyone could argue, the elevator chimed. The doors slid open and two uniformed officers stepped out, followed by a paramedic and the building manager. Red and blue lights from the street reached them in pulses, washing the room in an uneasy color. The party froze. "Officers," Malcolm said quickly, slipping into a controlled, respectful tone. "Thank you for coming. This has been a terrible accident. My wife." The lead officer, a tall woman with sharp eyes, held up a hand. "We'll need to speak with you in a moment, Mr. Vance. First, we need information about the victim. She is your wife, correct?" "Yes," Malcolm replied, pinching the bridge of his nose as if overwhelmed. "She slipped." "She's alive," the paramedic cut in, voice steady but urgent. The word slammed through the room like an explosion. "Alive." A glass shattered somewhere. A woman gasped. Tanisha's grip on the back of a chair tightened, her bracelets clinking softly as her knees almost gave out. "Alive," Malcolm repeated, voicing the word like a shock he didn't want to believe. "Are you certain?" "She landed on the hood of a vehicle," the paramedic said. "Severe injuries, but she survived the impact." Someone called 911 immediately. On the way to the hospital, she regained consciousness for a short period. The whole room leaned in without meaning to. "She said she was pushed," the paramedic added quietly. "By her husband." The reaction was instant. "No way. Oh my God. I knew it." Guests stumbled back from Malcolm as if he were an open flame. A woman put her hand over her heart. A man muttered a prayer under his breath. The music system, still on but forgotten, hummed quietly in the background like something from another world. "That isn't true," Malcolm said, voice cracking then turning hard. "She's confused. She must be. She slipped. There was snow. I tried to help her." The officer looked at him, expression unreadable. "We'll confirm her statement with the paramedics and doctors. But you should know several guests have already indicated they saw something more than a simple fall." "What guests?" Malcolm demanded. "Who?" People are in shock. They don't know what they saw. Tanisha, desperate, slipped into the silence, putting a hand on Malcolm's arm. Imani has been struggling emotionally, she told the officer, her tone soft and sympathetic. Malcolm tried so hard. She just wasn't herself tonight. From near the balcony, a woman snapped. You're lying. 10 minutes ago you were bragging about being with him. Heads turned. You said he was going to leave his wife. Another guest chimed in. You showed pictures. You said there were plans after the holidays. Color drained from Tanisha's face. That's not what You misheard. We heard you clearly, the first woman insisted. The officer made a mental note, eyes flicking between Tanisha and Malcolm. Ma'am, we'll need to speak with you as well, she said to Tanisha. Tanisha took a step back, panic clawing at the edges of her composure. I was only repeating what he told me, she blurted. He said she was unstable. He said. Another crack in Malcolm's story. The building manager approached the officers nervously, holding his phone. We've recovered backup files from the security system, he said. There's footage from the lobby and exterior. Someone attempted to erase the balcony recordings, but the system created a secondary copy. It can be restored. Every eye in the room flew to Malcolm. I didn't know about that, he said quickly. I just didn't want images of my wife's fall spread around. That's all. Destroying evidence of a possible crime is extremely serious, the officer replied. Before Malcolm could answer, the manager added, the car she landed on is registered to a man named Quentin Rhodes. Murmurs flared. Her ex. The tech billionaire? Are you serious? As if the name itself had been a summons, the elevator chimed again. The doors opened, and a tall man in a dark coat stepped into the penthouse, snow still clinging to his shoulders. His eyes swept the room quickly, taking in the officers, the guests, the glittering decorations that now looked grotesque. It was Quentin Rhodes. The atmosphere changed the moment he walked in, as if someone had shifted the weight in the room. Guests straightened. Conversations died mid-breath. Some people moved aside without consciously deciding to. Malcolm stared at him like a ghost had walked in. What are you doing here? Malcolm demanded, trying for authority but sounding more rattled than he meant to. Quentin didn't respond to him. He walked straight to the officer. I'm here about Imani Harper, he said, voice firm. I was told she fell on my car. I need to know her condition. She asked for me in the ambulance. And your relationship to the victim? The officer asked. She was with me before she married him, Quentin said, finally turning his gaze toward Malcolm. And she called my name while fighting to stay alive. She's confused, Malcolm snapped. He's her past. He has no right to be here, interfering. Quentin's face didn't change. She told the paramedics you pushed her off the balcony, he said quietly. The words dropped into the silence like stones, sending ripples all the way to the back of the room. He's lying, Malcolm shouted. He's always wanted attention, always wanted to steal what's mine. You stole her, Quentin replied calmly. Her father made a deal with you. I let her go because she chose what she thought was best. You turned that choice into a prison. The guests gasped. Some clapped a hand over their mouths. Others stared at Malcolm with something very close to disgust. Ask him about the cameras, the building manager added carefully. Ask who told security to erase footage. The officer turned fully to Malcolm now. Mr. Vance, you'll need to come with us for questioning. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Gasps echoed as the officers stepped to either side of him. Malcolm's shoulders slumped, the powerful host suddenly looking small in his own kingdom. He glanced around the penthouse, searching for support, but everywhere he looked he found only fear, suspicion, and cold distance. As the officers guided him toward the elevator, Quentin stood still, watching. He didn't smile. He didn't rush forward. He simply held Malcolm's gaze for one last moment and said quietly, Your control ended the second she survived. The elevator doors closed on Malcolm's pale face. Upstairs, the room erupted into frightened whispers. Downstairs, the police escort drove him into a future he could no longer script for himself. The city roared past in a blur of snow and lights as the ambulance sped through the streets toward Mercy General Hospital. Inside the cramped, bright space, everything felt too close, too loud, and somehow still too quiet. Imani lay strapped to the gurney, every breath a reminder of how hard her body had just hit metal. Pain throbbed along her ribs, her head, her shoulders. Bruises were already darkening under torn fabric. The world swayed with every turn, but the steady beep of the monitor beside her kept time with the most important sound in the world, her baby's heartbeat. "Stay with us, Imani," a paramedic said softly, shining a light into her eyes. "You're doing great. The baby's heart is strong. You're both fighters, okay?" She tried to answer, but her throat burned. Her voice came out more as a broken whisper than words. In her mind, the fall kept replaying. The shock of the push. The rail slipped away. The freezing air steals the breath from her lungs. The city spinning below her as she screamed. Malcolm's hand still outstretched at the edge of the balcony. His face twisted with fury and then horror. "He pushed me," she thought, the certainty like a brand in her chest. "He meant it." "Can you squeeze my hand?" the paramedic asked, offering his fingers. She forced herself to curl. He nodded. "Good. You're here with us. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt strange, like it belonged to someone else's life. "My baby," she rasped. "Is my baby okay?" "The heartbeat is strong," the paramedic said, his voice steady. "We're watching closely. Just keep breathing." Relief flooded her so intensely she almost cried. Everything else, the pain, the fear, the humiliation of landing on a stranger's car, fell away for a second. All that mattered was that tiny, steady rhythm beside her. Suddenly, the back doors burst open when the ambulance slowed at a light. Cold air surged in, followed by hurried footsteps thudding up the ramp. "Sir, you can't." "She asked for me," a familiar voice said, thick with emotion. "Her name is Imani Harper. She said my name." Her eyes fluttered open. "Quentin." He stepped into view, snow clinging to his coat, his face pale with fear and fury. He moved forward as if he belonged there, kneeling beside her as the paramedics adjusted around him. "Hey," he said, his voice breaking as he took her hand. "I'm here. I've got you." Tears blurred her vision, partly from pain, partly from the sudden, overwhelming wave of comfort in his presence. "Quentin," she whispered. "What happened?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm and failing. "Who did this to you?" She swallowed, fighting past the ache in her throat. "Malcolm pushed me," she said, the words slow but clear. He froze. For a moment, his jaw clenched so hard his teeth almost ground together. His eyes darkened, a storm gathering behind them, but his grip on her hand stayed gentle. "He pushed you," he repeated. "Yes," she whispered. "He wanted us gone. Me and the baby. I saw it in his face." Quentin bowed his head for a brief second, steadying himself. When he looked back up, there was no indecision left in him. "He won't come near you again," he said. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The ambulance swayed around a corner. Quentin braced himself against the wall with one hand, but didn't let go of her with the other. "You're not alone anymore," he said, softer this time. "Whatever he did on that balcony, he's going to answer for it. You survived a fall. No one survived. You and the baby." His voice broke. He cleared his throat. "You're stronger than you know." She closed her eyes as tears slid sideways into her hair. "I thought I was going to die," she confessed. "I know," he whispered. "But you didn't. That changes everything." Minutes later, the ambulance swung sharply into the hospital bay. The back doors opened again, and bright lights flooded the interior. Nurses rushed forward with another gurney, voices overlapping with medical orders and questions. She's conscious. Pregnant. Second trimester. Severe impact trauma. Heartbeat strong for now. Quentin walked beside her as they pushed her through the halls, keeping her hand in his until a nurse stepped between them. "Sir, we need room to work," she said. "You can wait just outside the curtain." "Imani," he said, leaning in one last time. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here when you wake up again. I swear." She nodded weakly, clinging to his voice as they wheeled her away. Behind the curtain, doctors and nurses moved with brisk efficiency. Machines beeped, monitors flickered, gloved hands moved quickly over bruised skin. Words like concussion, fracture, and observation floated above her. Through it all, the sound of her baby's heartbeat stayed steady, a quiet drum in the middle of chaos. Hours later, when the room finally calmed and the pain medication settled into a manageable ache, a soft morning light began sliding in through a slim window. The sky outside had traded night black for a muted gold. It felt like the world was slowly starting over. Imani lay propped up against pillows, wrapped in warm blankets. Every breath still hurt, but the panic that had gripped her chest since the balcony was loosening, one shaky inhale at a time. The baby's monitor still ticked away calmly. She reached for her belly and rested her palm over the bump. "We made it," she whispered. "We're still here." By the window stood Quentin, jacket removed, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messy. He had clearly not slept, yet he still stayed. When he turned and saw her watching him, his whole expression softened. "You look better," he said quietly, pulling the chair closer to her bed. "The doctor says you gave them a scare, but you're stable. So is the baby." She smiled weakly. "I heard them talking. They said, they're charging him." "Attempted murder," Quentin said, eyes hardening for a moment. "The officers came by earlier. They've got your statement. They recovered the security footage, too." He tried to erase it, but the system backed it up. "There are witnesses. He can't twist his way out this time." A knock sounded. A police officer stepped into the room, expression serious but kind. "Ms. Harper," she said. "I wanted you to know, Malcolm Vance has been denied bail. We're arranging a protective order. Legally and physically, he won't be coming near you again." Imani's eyes filled with tears she didn't expect. "Thank you," she managed. "What happened to you is not your fault," the officer added gently. "None of it. You did the right thing by speaking up." After the officer left, Imani let herself cry quietly. Tears of pain, yes, but also of relief. Of release. Of something heavy lifting off her chest after resting there for far too long. "I don't want my baby growing up in fear," she whispered. "No more screaming behind closed doors. No more walking on eggshells. I want peace. Even if it's small. Even if it's simple." "You'll have it," Quentin said. "You can stay with me until you decide your next move. My place is secure. No reporters at the door. We'll get you whatever help you need, legal, emotional, all of it. You don't have to figure this out alone." For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a different kind of life. One where her smiles weren't forced. One where she didn't have to scan Malcolm's face before speaking. One where her home was actually a home, not a beautifully decorated cage. "I'd like that," she whispered. Outside the hospital window, snow continued to fall softly over the city. For most people, it was just another winter morning. For Imani, it was the first morning of a life that truly belonged to her. By the time the sun fully climbed above the skyline, the penthouse that had once been a symbol of Malcolm's power looked like a crime scene in an expensive magazine spread. The Christmas tree still sparkled. The crystal ornaments still twinkled. But now, yellow tape cordoned off the balcony. Officers moved through the rooms taking statements. A shaken jazz musician packed his trumpet back into its case with trembling hands. Half-empty champagne flutes sat abandoned on every surface, their bubbles gone flat. Guests lined up along the walls, waiting to be called into a quieter side room to repeat their memories, this time to someone with a pen and a badge rather than a drink and a tuxedo. Tanisha stood near the bar, her face drained of everything but shock. Her glass shook in her hand, ice clinking against the sides. Only a few hours earlier, she had walked across that same marble floor imagining herself as the future Mrs. Vance. Now every word she'd whispered tonight felt like a rope slipping around her own neck. "You said he was going to leave his wife," an officer reminded her in a calm voice during questioning. "You showed people photographs. You described her as unstable." I was just repeating what he told me," she said, voice wobbling. "He said she was struggling. He said he was trying to help her. I didn't know. I never thought." But the guest statements told a different story. Tanisha as the loving future partner, Malcolm as the victim of a difficult wife, Imani as a fragile problem. The lies she had woven to lift herself up now helped tie a knot in Malcolm's case. Downstairs, in a holding cell, Malcolm sat staring at the opposite wall. The word suspect echoed in his ears. Then attempted murder. Then, "You have the right to remain silent." He replayed the fall in his mind again and again, trying to reshape it into something that wasn't his fault, something that looked like an accident even to himself. But no matter how he dragged the memory around, it always ended the same way. His hand on her arm, her heels sliding, her eyes wide with terror before the balcony disappeared under her feet. His empire, built on charm and intimidation, had never felt so fragile. Outside Mercy General, reporters had already gathered, bundled in coats, microphones poised. Cameras turned on as soon as a hospital door opened, hoping to catch a nurse, a doctor, anyone with a detail they could spin into a headline. Inside, the world felt smaller and calmer. A few hours later, when the doctor finally signed off for temporary discharge, Imani eased into a wheelchair, pain sharp but manageable. Bandages hugged her ribs. A soft cap covered the stitches near her hairline. Her pregnancy belly rose proudly beneath the folded blanket. Quentin pushed the chair with careful hands. "Are you sure you're okay with this?" he asked quietly. "They can keep you one more night." "I'll rest better somewhere that doesn't smell like antiseptic," she said. "And I believe you when you say your place is safe." He smiled faintly. "Then we're going home. Your new home, for as long as you want it." In the lobby, officers formed a gentle barrier between her and the press outside. A few camera flashes burst through the glass doors, but the police kept the crowd back. "Ms. Harper, just one question. Did your husband push you? Was someone else involved?" She didn't answer. She didn't even look their way. For years, she had been told to smile for cameras, to stand perfectly beside Malcolm at fundraisers, to play the role of the polished wife. Today, she simply kept her gaze ahead and let the officers guide her through. The cold air outside stung her cheeks. Snowflakes landed softly on her blanket, on Quentin's shoulders, on the roofs of the parked cars. The world smelled clean, sharp, new. As they moved toward his car, the same one that had taken the impact meant to kill her, a strange calm settled in her chest. She had fallen on that hood. It had bent, groaned, and held. That car had turned a deadly drop into a second chance. "This is the beginning, isn't it?" she whispered, turning her head slightly to look up at him. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "This is your beginning. You survived him. Now you get to decide what comes next." She nodded, hand resting over her belly, feeling the small life moving inside. No more pretending. No more quiet panic when keys turned in the lock. No more laughing on cue for strangers' benefit while swallowing fear. The future still terrified her. Court dates, testimonies, reliving the worst night of her life. But for the first time, she felt more powerful than scared. Later, much later, when she was settled under a soft blanket in a warm guest room miles away from the penthouse, she told her story out loud. To detectives. To advocates. And eventually, on a quiet evening, to a camera. "Welcome to Voices of Auntie May," she said gently to the lens. "Around here I share real-life stories. The kind that hurt, the kind that heal, and the kind that remind us we're stronger than we think." Her voice didn't shake anymore. I hope my story reminds someone out there that getting out is possible. That survival is possible. That starting over is possible, even after you fall farther than you ever thought you could. She smiled, small but genuine. If this touched you, show me by tapping like and subscribing. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you want to help me keep sharing them with you every day, you can always support the channel in a little extra way. She took a breath, feeling the baby flutter faintly beneath her hand. 2 of my most watched stories should be popping up on your screen now. Pick whichever one calls to you. And remember, no matter how high you fall from, if you're still breathing, your story isn't over yet. Then she clicked stop. Outside, snow began to fall again. Quiet, soft, and new.